Hey, Marty.
Yeah?
So we've got a good episode for the peeps coming up today.
I think so.
Yeah, we talk about, in this episode, we talk about what it's like to feel alien when you're among the very people that you're supposed to feel at home with, right? And that's come from, it's a BeWild Files. It's come from one of our beautiful listeners.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about how the spirit of community is different from the simple grouping together of people into clusters, and how if you have people that you feel different from, that can be a good thing because it enhances the wisdom of the crowd.
Yeah, it's like we sort of went in two directions, and I think it'll be an interesting listen because on the one hand, you know, we want to be with who we want to be with. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, sometimes we need to challenge ourselves. So that is a great episode ahead for you. Settle down, make a cup of tea, enjoy, and we'll see you on the other side.
Hi, I'm Martha Beck.
And I'm Rowan Mangan, and you have arrived at yet another episode of Bewildered. You know it. It's the podcast for the people who are trying to figure it out.
And as usual,
it's wondering
us. Yeah, that is us. So what are you trying to figure out right now, my Rowie?
Well, Marty, I was going to talk about one thing that I had been thinking about, but in the process of setting up this podcast, we have had so many technical snafus that I just feel like I'm just trying to figure out, because I've listened to a lot of podcasts, and I honestly feel like either they're all spectacular actors or shit doesn't go as wrong for most podcasters as often as it does for us, because they come on and it honestly just sounds like, I mean, we live together, so it's a bit different, but say there's two people, they're like, hey, hi, how you doing? Oh my God, I'm in Philadelphia. Yeah. Oh, well, I'm in New York. Da, 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 da. And it's like, honestly, they're so fresh, like they just...
Right? Their sound is perfect. Their look is perfect. They did not struggle with 9 different types of Ethernet connection or whatever. No. They just roll out of bed and everything works for them. That's my theory on everyone but us.
I think what I'm trying to figure out today, Marty, is why me? It's an original question that no one's ever asked before.
No one's ever asked that question before.
And there's no self-pity.
No, not at all.
The thing was that I decided to get incredibly high on caffeine before we started. And so at the height of our technical issues, it was also the height of my caffeine high.
Oh, that's not good.
And so it was like I kind of got some version of roid rage with it.
Oh, yeah, I could tell.
It was real. It was real,
It was real.
Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to figure out, is just why they don't work.
For you, for me, for us.
For us. Why they don't work for us.
I don't know.
And if anyone knows, please, answers on the back of a postcard. Send them to freaking space. I don't know, because I don't know how that works.
I know, they'll never get to us.
Just write it on a postcard and throw it out your window. So I love you, everybody. Thanks for bearing with us until this moment. And if we're frazzled, that's why.
That's
caffeine
why.
And mercury. Marty, what on earth are you trying to figure out? And this better be good.
Well, for me, it's like I watch you put all the gizmos together, and you are like the gizmo girl.
Yes.
I knew when computers were invented that they would be a thing. I was prescient. I was like, someday I should learn to use one of those. Meanwhile, you're doing all the you do every kind of computerized function there is, but you also, you are, my dear, homo habilis habilis.
Am I?
Yes,
I mean, homo, I won't argue with. Homo
yes,
is
exactly. So do you know what the homo habilis did? Was
no,
distinctive.
my darling.
Tool use. Oh. I think that you have like a genetic, if we could do a genetic screen for massive amounts of straight down the line tool using, tool inventing, charisma, you would have inherited a huge amount of it. The problem is that I will do everything literally with a piece of wood and a toothpick. And I'm not even exaggerating.
No, she will eat. She actually told this story last week and I was like, this is so true. And people don't think this about you. If she wants to avoid human beings and she's like at a retreat center or something, she'll have a jar of peanut butter and a Bic biro. Do you say biro in America?
Pen. Nobody knows what a biro is.
Well, that's stupid because it's a type
biro
of pen.
is you because you've dated men and women.
Oh my God. That's
you
so
homo habilis, you.
Full-time homo these days. Hashtag blessed. Well, biro is a kind of pen. So congratulations. Eating peanut butter with a pen out of the jar to avoid humans. And she'll use a Bic biro for anything.
If I don't have a spoon. I mean, it's not like I like put in my suitcase a jar of peanut butter and a pen to eat it with. I put in my suitcase a jar of peanut butter, which I think is really incredible tool use. I usually just smear peanut butter on. No, but here's the thing.
All right.
Yeah, I just grab whatever's handy. I remember I used to do watercolor when I was a teenager, and you need things to blot it with. And if I didn't, I wouldn't have a Kleenex or a paper towel around to blot my painting. I would just think, well, this shirt isn't really that great. Take it off and start using it to blot paint. I use crossover tools.
Yeah, it's like we're actually at sort of two ends of the spectrum. Of how we interact with the objects and tools in our lives. Like I am always flabbergasted by how you can grab something, use it in a way that it wasn't, as you say, like ever intended to be used. But then as the function for the thing is made redundant by you using it, the object itself ceases to exist for you. And
this is true.
So things just get dropped all around at all times. And it's very... Whereas for me, it's like I want the perfect thing.
Yep.
I want the exact thing.
Yes, you do.
And I will want something and I don't know if it exists or not. And I will Google thing that is kind of like a blah, blah, blah. And it's a wonderful thing to live in the age of Amazon. That's all I can say.
So here's the thing. Anything that I do or Karen, anybody in the house, anything we do, Ro is scouting the gizmos for us. So something comes
I love you.
In the mail, and it's something like, for example, and I love you, but this thing that you bought, it's for applying mascara, which as a good Mormon girl, you might not know this, a good Utah Mormon girl, we learn to use appropriate makeup when we're like 12, and then you're not supposed to ever go outside without it. So I've been putting on mascara with a mascara applicator for 130 years. And Ro bought me this thing that's difficult to describe. It sort of looks like the mouth of an eel. And the function of it is you press it up against your eye in some way. And then you can like mascara the crap out of your eyelashes in a way that is supposed to be easier. But in fact, for me, nearly blinded me the first time I tried to use it. Because I would put on mascara with my fingers if I had to.
It's the first time I'm hearing about my thoughtful gift, by the way.
It was a wonderful, thoughtful gift, and I'm very grateful that you went to the trouble. We got
China,
together.
that came from. All the way from China for you.
I know. Speaking of watercolor, Ro bought me this little gizmo that it's a plastic bottle turned upside down on a plastic stand with a little button, and it's meant to be that you press the button and you empty the dirty water that you've been using in your paint, and then clean water flows into it. And it works. It works. It works very similarly to a bottle of water. Like it's so fancy. And
you use it.
I do use it because I love you, and it works as well as a bottle of water. It's great. It's fantastic. I love it. Oh boy. Our relationship is degenerating as we speak.
Thoughtful, kind, loving gifts that until this moment I thought were
I love the watercolor
gratefully
tool. I do love the watercolor water tool. Unfortunately, Karen, we just had a thing. We got her, Ro and I got together because Ro showed me something, and I understand how you feel, because it was like, this thing Karen will love. Because what Karen does for enjoyment
can't
is
buy
watching.
For Karen. I just have to say, like, you cannot buy for Karen. She's
You can't.
impossible.
But she watches Scandinavian movies, Scandinavian movies on her phone, like, not on a computer, not on a television, on her phone. So she's constant. She will hold her phone up in front of her face for 3 to 5 solid hours. Now, at that point, I would be losing an arm, right? So Ro found this thing that goes behind your head and over your shoulders, and it sticks out in front of you and holds your phone up at exactly the right level to watch.
You can rest your arms.
Karen just started laughing hysterically and refused to use it. It's not the Danish way, apparently. She's into the Danish way. It's like, we used ice for that.
People don't understand how much easier I can make their lives.
But I have to say, the joy of watching you use your special gizmos just makes my heart soar.
Me too.
We recently went on a trip, and every time we unpacked in a different room, Ro would go, "It's here." It is a special pad that she puts around one knee specifically, so that while she's sleeping, the other knee will not knock against it uncomfortably. Really? Like,
I love that thing.
Like, how? Yes, you love it, and I love to see how much you love it. It's amazing, and oh boy. It's like I'm confessing on a live public forum that I'm not as good a tool user as you, even when you buy me a tool that I should enjoy using. And I'm trying to be a better tool user, and that is what I'm trying to figure out.
Well, I think we've all just learned a lot about you in this past little segment. And your gratitude.
Ooh, the librarian in you is coming out.
All right, let's move on. We'll take this offline, I think, my darling. We'll be right back with more Bewildered. We don't say this enough. We are so glad you're a Bewildered listener, and we're hoping you might want to go to the next level with us, by which I mean if you rate and review the podcast, it helps new people find us so we can keep bewildering new souls, and you know how much we love that. Ratings are very much appreciated. Obviously, the more stars you give us, the more appreciation is forthcoming. Reviews are quite simply heaven, and we read every one and exclaim over them, and we just love you all. Mwah. Hey, so we haven't done a BeWild Files episode for a while, have we?
Yeah.
Which, for any uninitiated listeners, is the kind of episode where we talk about what you're trying to figure out for a change. Because, as I like to say, it's not all about us.
What?
Look, hey, I don't make the rules. So listen, today we're going to hear from Alia.
Hi, Martha and Rowan. I feel like I'm connecting more frequently with my true nature. And as a result, I feel like an alien from another planet, in particular when it comes to relating to people that have been part of my life for a long time, whether it's friends or colleagues or extended family. And I grew up in a culture with an understanding that your family is central. It's everything. You almost don't exist if you are not somehow enmeshed with your family. And that no longer feels true for me, and it's a bit disorienting. Is it normal that I prefer to hang out with just a couple of folks who really get me? Shouldn't I be trying to develop a greater sense of connection and community with others? I'd love to hear about your experiences. Thanks.
I've felt like an alien from another planet. Have you?
Oh, yes. In this moment, I do. And I have for years. And when I first told this to Karen, she panicked and called a bunch of people to come turn me normal, and it didn't work.
Maybe she didn't call them to turn you normal. Maybe she just called them for backup because she felt like you were about to turn into a giant lizard or a praying mantis, a human-sized praying mantis or something.
It's a fair bet. Yeah, I could see why she would do that, because most people need other people, and she needed other people around her to feel calm.
I think there's like something that like we've talked about recently on episodes about neurodivergency, and I can't help thinking that there's a correlation between that alien feeling, maybe for some of us at least, and having neurodivergent tendencies, because if our brains do work differently, then and you're in a group of people who are neurotypical, for example, I'm just saying, that could make you feel like an alien.
Yeah.
I know I do.
I remember when I first heard the phrase stranger in a strange land, which was the title of a book, but I think it comes from the Bible. And I remember resonating so strongly with that as a child. And I had never traveled. I had never been a stranger in a strange land. I grew up in this huge family and I felt completely alien. And yeah.
It's a conundrum, I think, because we do, as you say, need each other. Mm-hmm. And I know that there are quite clear directives from the culture, as Alia is kind of intimating, that that tell us that how we should cluster into groups.
Absolutely.
You know, like there's a sort of immediate family, extended family, close friends, you know, it's sort of smudged together. I mean, for instance, and then, you know, there's things like you know, like there's little social categories that you can fall into, like moms at the school drop off or whatever.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh my gosh, the mom thing. I remember when I had grade school kids, and this other mom she brought her kid over for a play date, and we were talking, and she said, "Isn't it just amazing how you just want to watch your kids constantly?" And she and the other moms had been watching their kids at swim practice so intensely that the coaches had banned them. So they rented a hotel room across the window and across the street and watched through the window through binoculars. And she said, "Isn't it just amazing how you feel compelled to do that? Because we all do." And I just looked at her and thought, "Hey, what planet am I from? Not your planet." And trying to fit in when it was supposed to come naturally, it drained my energy. You're supposed to feel fulfilled in these clusters. That's, I think, what Alia is saying, that you not only are clustered with people, but that's meant to feel fulfilling to you. But to me, trying to fit in with almost every group I've ever been in just sucks energy out of me. Now, being with a community of people I feel really relaxed around, just one or two people or a whole group, that actually adds to my energy. So that must be what it does for other people.
I think so. There's almost something here that we can start to delineate, right? Is that there's like assigned community, which are the people that the culture tells you should enjoy spending time with, and many people do, and good on you. Like that, nothing wrong with it. But it's if that works, that's lucky. And then there's like what we're going to call true community, and sometimes they could be the same thing, and we're not saying otherwise. But so Marty's saying that being with people that we're supposed to be with, if they're not true community, is going to suck her energy, and being with people who is going to give her energy, which I think is sensible. I think that's a fairly sensible and fairly, to me, normal kind of thing. And I think, you know, the size, like what Ali is saying about a few people versus a lot of people, I think that probably changes over time, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, and I also think these questions are, it's just an interesting moment in history to be thinking about this stuff, because I do think that these ideas of like these assigned community notions, that they feel like a sort of holdover to me from when the village would be the whole world.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. You know, when you read fairy tales about the most beautiful girl in the kingdom, the bravest knight in the kingdoms they're talking about were about 135 people. That's the span of human attention before the band has to sort of break up. We have the attention span to hold like 135 humans in our heads, and that was the village size, and that was it. That's who you got to see.
Oh my God, I just thought of another correlation is what about high school? Like when you say about the most beautiful girl in the kingdom and the bravest knight, it's like, oh, you can see that as your kind of I don't know what you would call it, but like your year level, your group of people that you go through high school with is like that would also nourish that sort of idea of the village, right? Because there's a whole little society in there.
There's a really strong tendency to start a band size from 50 to 135 that our brains seem to have really like locked in terms of evolution. And whenever we're in a group that between those two sizes, we start to create the same dynamics. And you're right, that it's a village environment and it takes hold of us whenever we're in a subgroup. And in the past, those were the only people you ever got to meet ever.
And, you know, like, because, and that's a survival need in that instance, right? That, you know, because otherwise you're cast out and, or I don't know what, thrown in a well or something. I don't know about villages. But like now that we can connect in all sorts of ways, including the way we're connecting right now with you listening on your little headphones in your little car. I don't know where, but I know that we're connected.
They may be in a well.
Maybe they're in a well.
And
save your battery.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, because it's not a survival need, then suddenly just being shoved together with someone or being told that the people you're shoved together with should be a community, that doesn't create the same sense. So it's like, okay, so what does create a sense of community, Marty?
Well, I looked up the word community because I'm a massive nerd.
Because you're a nerd, yeah.
And it comes from the Latin communitas. And I was interested to see that there are two meanings. And one is that it's just a group of people who happen to be together. And the other is a spiritual sense of communion that arises between people who feel connected. And that can arise whether or not somebody is physically with you. So somebody goes out traveling, that sense of community with them doesn't go away just because they're physically absent. So it's even back in the days of spoken Latin, they differentiated between the sort of physical reality of a group and the spiritual sense of connection. And
that's interesting. Yeah, it wasn't assumed to be the same thing.
No. And then there was an anthropologist in the 1960s who started using the Latin word communitas to refer to the connection that can arise. And this is so interesting because we're talking about stepping out of culture. Communitas arises when people who are together step out of their social roles. So, yeah. And this is why in villages, as you correctly surmised, where you have that necessary clustering of people, even there, they did things, every pre-modern society did something that was partly meant to create that spiritual sense of community, even though they were always physically grouped together and depending on each other. And the thing they would all do is ritual.
Oh, as a way of stepping outside the role.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a way of, like, there would be something where maybe you'd be isolated in a hut or a cave or something for a day or two so that you can find out who you are. Sometimes some societies would take the young men out, obscure their faces so they didn't know who they were anymore, and bewilder them. You know, it's like the Bewildered podcast. Like they take, I think in Australia and many other places, the young men would be taken out into the wilderness, and then the indigenous. Yeah.
Okay.
The older male elders would use these things called bull roarers, which you'd whirl them in the air and they made this terrifying sound, and it wasn't natural. And they never, the pubescent men who were going out there would not have heard this sound. And it was meant to make them feel like they were in an alien place. And then they would have to figure out between themselves how to handle a completely new situation when they had dropped their social roles and they were in what's called a liminal space on the threshold, not neither one thing nor another. And so in some ways, nothing. And in other ways, able to become or do anything. And that created a communitas, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think we had that experience. We went to Costa Rica earlier in the year and we were basically on a retreat. We went to the Imaloa Institute where we're going to be running retreats in the future. And we had that experience of communitas, of stepping out of social roles through ritual and through getting away, which we've talked about before.
Right. And since we're so antisocial, I expected there to be lovely people, and I always get along with people at a kind of surfacey level. I can mask up and be like a human, even if I feel like a stranger in a strange land. But we did rituals that Imaloa had already established. There's this gorgeous water. Well, shouldn't spoil it for people who want to go to the retreats, but there's this sort of sacred place you go to, and they did a ritual where they have this special blue mud.
Blue
and
clay.
You obscure your identity. Blue clay, yeah. And it was shocking to me how it took me out of our culture. We do not typically in our culture, I don't know if you know this, Ro, but in Manhattan, if you go to, for a job or something, typically they will not smear you with blue clay. It's
Well,
just not
no, but
something.
wouldn't you be expected to show up already like pre-smeared?
Pre-smeared? Oh, probably in some places.
Just to show you're a self-starter.
Yeah. But I have to say, we were busy putting on the clay, and I turned around and you looked like a character from Avatar. And it was super cool. But and there were other people there, as we said, and they all sort of looked like characters from Avatar. But as our faces became obscured and people's bodies became obscured, at first people were really self-conscious, but one of the effects of the clay was it sort of covered up body flaws.
Body floss?
Flaws.
Okay.
Not even flaws, but things that people consider flaws in their body, or people, it was covering up. It made everybody look really smooth and Avatar and awesome.
Yeah.
Everybody looked awesome.
Everyone looked awesome, yeah.
But not human.
No, that's right.
And I could feel myself relaxing as everyone got a little confused and shy and then surrendered their identities because they could see that nobody could actually see each other's faces the same way or bodies.
Wow.
And
even in that like little tiny short-term microculture that we'd built up as retreat participants.
Yeah. And I was with someone who had gone through my coach training program, but I'd never met them ever. And when we had the blue clay on our bodies, suddenly I was like, I'd been thinking I need to connect with her because I love people who go through the program, but I'm so shy. Well, when we had the blue clay on, my shyness went away and my sense of separation went away.
That's
and
so cool.
it was very, very bonding with that person and many others. Yeah.
I feel the same way. Yeah. And I mean, it's funny because it's like that's part of the purpose of going on retreat, right?
Yeah.
To retreat from culture.
Yes.
And we're constantly having roles assigned to us and therefore groups that we're supposed to belong to. And to have that opportunity to rediscover who we are separate from all those roles in the culture.
And the idea of, I love retreat because it's a subtraction word. You're not adding anything. And it's like my favorite quote from the Tao Te Ching: in the pursuit of knowledge, every day something is added. In the pursuit of enlightenment, every day something is dropped. So you drop and drop and drop. You retreat from something, this world where we feel like aliens. And it's not specified where we go because we don't need to know who we are when we're there. It subtracts our social identity and all the codes of how we're supposed to associate with people who are supposed to be in our groups. And we don't have to have an individual special self. We can just disappear. And weirdly, as you drop your sense of a separate self, which is so much what our culture is about, be a separate self, be individualistic. As you drop that need to be a separate person, you drop into the nature of relationships without culture.
Wow.
And it's really lovely and intimate.
That's so cool. Yeah, it's funny because our retreat that we're going to be doing at Imiloa is called Pure Wild Self, and we use the word self in a very different sense from the way you just used it, not as the egoic, individualistic, separate self, but self the way that it's talked about in internal family systems therapy, where self is actually a stand-in word for kind of like higher self or soul.
And as Dick Schwartz, the founder of IFS, told me himself, the self is in everything and everybody. So part of what was so intimate about that, sorry, we're raving about it because we had a really fun time. But the self included these gigantic trees and plants and the waterfall, and it included the mountains and the ocean. And self was everywhere, so you didn't need to do anything to protect yourself. You could go into that liminal space between what you used to be and what you're going to be, and you're just present as part of the self that was the entire ecosystem.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So to be free of the role, in a sense, is an opportunity to find yourself in your essence, whatever it is beneath.
Yes,
the role.
Drop the role, and you don't feel that you've lost anything. You feel that you've found the essence of who you are.
So, Marty, it's normal, I think we've established, to need to cluster to some extent, right? As social apes, this is part of our makeup. So, some people I think are very solitary creatures, and that's good too. Yeah. But I think that in our socialization, a lot of within culture, again, a lot of our personality gets kind of downloaded into us from our family of origin and local culture and all those sorts of things. If that personality that you've downloaded is a good fit for who you are, that's great. You might never need to question that original cluster, right?
Yeah.
But and people can get really into it as though, I don't know, maybe this is just a personal sort of bugbear, but I think some people can take their family of origin or their community of origin, and it can be like a football team or nationalism or something, and people get so because it's a good fit for them, then it's superior or something. And that's so strange because it seems to me like such an accident if you feel like a good fit in your family or in your community.
Speaking of parents and sports, there was a time many years ago, but these two children's hockey teams were playing against each other, and two of the fathers got into such a violent fight over the game that one of them killed the other one. He pushed a vending machine on him and it killed him.
That's the most American murder I've ever heard.
American murder, vending machine. So true. We dispense death.
Very
but
good.
You're so right. It's completely arbitrary. They just group a bunch of people together. Here, there's a little thing. You push it around with a stick. Go on the ice, and your fathers will kill each other because of it. What?
Oh my gosh.
That's it. I do think we fall into that, and part of feeling like an alien is maybe not having that gear.
Yeah.
I don't think I want to kill the other hockey team's parent.
Yeah.
But so some clusters actually, what we try to create and what we're trying to create with the Bewildered podcast is to gather people where the common culture is actually to encourage people to be their unique selves, to find self with a capital S. But a lot of the groups you'll fall into get into the othering that is very, very inherent in the human brain. And those groups, they prescribe conformity, and then they other groups that or anyone who's outside the group. And if you happen to be in that and it doesn't work for you, you get this feeling of being an alien. I had a client once who said it this way. She said, I don't love the people I belong to, and I don't belong to the people I love.
Just on the thing about like the pressure to all be the same, I think that like that the idea of diversity and spectrums and any ideas that that don't just divide people into us and them, like that stress plurality rather than duality among people is always going to kind of confound that that othering thing that's definitely part of our psychology, and you can see why it would be from an evolutionary point of view. Yeah. But I don't love the people I belong to, and I don't belong to the people I love. I totally I mean I do love the people I belong to.
I loved my family growing up, but as I matured, I got less and less like them. And because we were all raised in a very sort of rigid religious system, there wasn't a template for encouraging individuality that I could find. So if you just happen to be in a group that wants conformity and you naturally are like that, you'll thrive. But if you aren't, then the very pressure that holds bands together can make you feel pushed off your true nature. And then you may learn to act like you belong, but you'll end up feeling lonely and isolated like a stranger in a strange land. And if you all are feeling that way out there in podcast listening world, we're just validating. That's a real thing. And if you feel that way, it's because of the dynamics we're talking about.
Yeah. It's I think that there's just a tendency is towards absolutism. Like you know, sometimes like there can always be a both. There can always be an every in it as well. Like I love the people I belong to, and I live a really long way away from them because I connected so deeply with you and with our family that we've chosen. And I just mean like it doesn't all have to be so all or nothing, you know. And and I just wanted to say what I sort of brought up before about diversity. There's almost a kind of problem with our post-village world where, like, if you were in the village and, yes, you have a role and it's all very problematic and you don't get to express your true self and but one thing that you do get access to is you have to learn to tolerate a lot of different people and a lot of different types of people. And now I think there's this sort of trend where we're kind of algorithmically connected or exposed only to people who think the way that we do. We never have to be exposed to different opinions, and that's much more comfortable for us, right? But is it like shrinking our comfort zones? And you know, are we kind of vulnerable to being triggered really easily because we're not building our resilience again to difference, to different ideas, to like what are we losing at the same time as we're gaining so much opportunity to connect with like people. And I just want to say, as disclaimer, I am totally like that. I hate dealing with people whose politics are different from mine. I will go to great lengths to avoid it. I'm not saying I practice anything different. I'm just saying, that's could be a bit of a problem.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like the first time in history there can be a vast crowd of introverts.
Right.
I remember one time we were planning a conference and the extroverts were going, you know, we should have a special meeting for the introverts. They should have a place to go. And I was like, we do. They'll all have their own hotel room. I'll be in mine. They'll be in theirs.
Yeah. They know where to go, guys.
Exactly. They don't need a crowd. It doesn't make us unhappy the way it makes you unhappy when there's no crowd. But, and you know, when we went on our little retreat, as research for the retreats are running, I was like, ugh, there's going to be other people there. Oh, dear. And when we got there, okay, it was very self-selected, people who are sort of into the same things we are. But I was out of my comfort zone, and my comfort zone got bigger because I connected so deeply. And I have to say, the ancient tradition of ritual was very, very powerful in creating that. There's also something, it reminded me that when we avoid diversity, we lose a bit of what is called the wisdom of crowds. I may have mentioned it on the podcast before, but it's this weird thing in economics where if a group of people, a crowd of people, all try to say, come up with the number of beans there would be in a barrel, the average, if you add them all up and divide by the number of people, the average guess will be closer to accurate than any one person's guess. So
So what's the benefit of that?
A crowd ostensibly is wiser than any individual in the crowd. But, and here's the big thing that we've got to remember. The more diverse the crowd is, the more wise its decisions are. So, for example, when my son Adam was diagnosed with Down syndrome at Harvard, I was surrounded by Harvard professors and Harvard doctors, and they were basically saying, you really need to get rid of this kid. He's not going to be smart. He's not going to be like us. But the wisdom of crowds says that a group of people that has that person with Down syndrome and people with all kinds of diversity is going to be wiser than a bunch of intellectuals who are all alike. So,
and for me, the equivalent of that would be, and where that would be confronting for me is that would include people who wear red baseball caps, right?
Yes.
With letters and words on them that make me feel scared. That's also true. Is
exactly
that the crowd's going to be wiser if it includes those people too, which.
Yeah, so let us accept our individuality and our differences and our sense of being alien and the urge to belong with the people we love. And let's keep this was a huge light bulb for me. That you were saying you should challenge the algorithm once in a while. You should challenge
we mustn't get too comfortable in our algorithm.
Yeah, you can find people who are really, really exactly like you, as at least when you're both chatting online. You know, there may be times, as I used to say, remember when we went to the redwood forest and I was like obsessed with nature and just wanted to be out in nature. And then it got dark and there were no stores and all I had to eat was cheesecake. And I was driving along in the dark going, I'm all about nature until I need something.
Yes.
So, yeah, it was a huge thing for me that let's bond with our alien pals. But as you said, challenge the algorithm periodically to keep our lives from shrinking and our purview from getting smaller and less wise.
And in doing so, we will all
stay wild.
We hope you're enjoying Bewildered. If you're in the USA and want to be notified when a new episode comes out, text the word WILD to 570-873-0144. We're also on Instagram. Our handle is Bewildered Podcast. You can follow us to get updates, hear funny snippets and outtakes, and chat with other fans of the show. Bewildered is produced by Scott Forster with support from the brilliant team at MBI. And remember, if you're having fun, please rate and review. And stay wild.